Yeah. Okay. So client input for attack. So this is assuming a 100 millisecond ping, or I guess a 200, let's say a 200 RTT, 100 millisecond ping. Really bad ping. 200 RTT is awful. But the reason I wrote those numbers is because it's easy to do math on. So client input attack, 100 milliseconds later, server receives attack message, sends attack message to all clients. This is when you would begin the attack. Client here begins a fake like confirmation for it, right? So you'll start moving so that it doesn't feel sluggish, but the actual attack, I don't think we actually do this delay anymore. How long has it been since updated? Let me check. It would probably be outside of the blueprint side of things. Yeah, because we used to do the opposite where we'd skip part of the animations to line up. So the server, you would play it immediately as a predictive thing. And as long as the server says like, yeah, that would work, the server would skip the beginning part of the animation. That's what we used to do. And I think it's a good idea. It's just because I'm not a good animator. The issues we'd run into is combat was way too fast. It was hard to react to anything because in PvP, you would get the message based on the half RTT of each client added together, which is a long time. So in this sense, you start attacking, or they do the input for the attack. You would get it 200 milliseconds later, and we'd have to skip 200 milliseconds of the animation. And by that point, it's really hard to react to. And so we stopped doing a skip and started doing the opposite where we wait. Thing is, doing a wait instead of a skip makes it feel slower based on things, right? So it's like, I haven't noticed it personally, but theoretically, I guess if the number was stretched out enough, it would start to make it feel unfair because your attack speed would feel slower than everybody else. Right, because your animations has like this beginning part to it that's a little bit longer by 200 milliseconds. Or actually, it'd only be like 100 milliseconds at that point, which is a tenth of a second. So your animations are a tenth of a second longer. But in theory, they would feel longer than when you see somebody else attack you, and we have to do a lot of testing for it because a tenth of a second is a really small amount of time. But yeah, from your point of view, other people attack you, like you have to react faster to other people's animations than they have to react to yours, which isn't entirely true because it's the same for them, right? Your animations don't have that tiny like tenth of a second buildup that theirs does on their end. So like it's fair for everybody, but it might not feel fair. That's what I'm afraid of. I think that's how we currently do it. I'd have to dive into there is the base melee. Actually, let me see. No, because this just declares the client data. So pre-melee attack, which is the client only side of things. On release input, we queue it up. That's another, this is actually the first time I'm saying this because I know it's going to be fixed now. I didn't know if I was going to fix this before doing some public testing. Huge vulnerability of the game right now is queuing abilities. Queuing is done local only because the game used to be a client-third game. We didn't want to do PvP, but we changed the idea of the game. So because of it, the whole queuing system for abilities was done locally. Now that we've changed the idea of the game, this needs to be reworked. And I do plan on reworking before public testing, but I didn't plan on doing like reworking that before, so I never used to say anything. I was gonna just like we were gonna do because I figured if we did like a weekend of public testing, nobody was gonna be able to break the game in one weekend without knowing that that's how that works definitively. But now you guys know. but it won't matter because it's getting reworked. Anyways, yeah. The graph. Server plays, let me think. So the server, we make sure the server plays it behind what you play it. So we do predict a little bit of the attack. So full RTT time later, that's when you and other clients, your attacks are linked up in real time, theoretically. Obviously, we can't like overly confirm that because like the packet could have taken a different, like if you had a 30 millisecond ping and then this time it like jumped a little bit to like 40 or 50. So, which is an insanely small amount of time, but it's still like theoretically not actually lined up, but is. Let's just say it is, right? Because those tiny amounts of time shouldn't matter. Server doesn't wait anymore. This is wrong. The server does not wait anymore. I'm pretty sure the server doesn't wait. I'm pretty sure. Make a new one of these and change it to what we're actually doing. I don't think we delay. I think we immediately start the attack on the server, who is ahead of people. Because I know parrying is different. I really hope I wrote down how parrying works. It's the first of you seen of SAS components, really? Whoa, what is all? Oh yeah, this is a bunch of extra stuff. Root distance things. Yeah, these are abilities. They're gonna change a little bit with the rework. Just see effects. Yeah, our effects used to work like gas does effects, but I hate how gas does effects. That you used to like child class an effect and then just decide data. And at that point I was like, well, if it's because that's how effects work with gas, right? You make a child class and then just fill this out. But if it's only data, why you're making child class? So now instead we do like data asset style where you just instance the object and set data. That way we don't have classes for all this stuff because that's crazy. But we started before I learned about instanced objects for data. We would do what gas did where it was just like hard-coded data. That's everything the effect does. But I changed all that. So most of the stuff got reworked out of here. And so those don't matter. And it's all just effect definitions now. So I can say the block effect, and then we can grab a new definition and say it's a regeneration definition, and it regenerates the blocking tag to its max value on activated. And I can override delay and speed. Archetype effects. I'll have to look at archetype effects. I don't know what those are. But that's a lot of how our effects work is based on these definitions now. And I really like doing it this way because it's data oriented, and the same way like you know how data oriented. Same way like our items are set up. You just decide a bunch of data, and that's what this has. It's really nice. Sorry, let me catch my chat. Attacker gets so the his up is having a long client only wind up on attacks. No, the hit stop is actually here. I can actually just show a video of hit stop real quick. Maybe the Brave browser sucks. Hold on. Hit stop. I don't know what to type. What is hit stop? Let me just see a video. It's that.
That doesn't exist in any other medium.
Do it again.
You might not know
this. So every time he hits, you can see his character freezes for a second.
it is, but you've definitely felt
that right there. It adds feel. We do that because the client hits the client and the server should hit around the same time. In real time, but because there's a latency from the server to the client, and we don't really want to predict effects, we do like a hit stop, which ours doesn't last that long. That was a really long one. Ours is at most 100 milliseconds, so a tenth of a second. So it's like boom, and then you continue. And during that little freeze, by the time you unfreeze, we know exactly what is going to happen with this attack. Unless you're lagging really bad, then like I said, the game's not going to feel good for you. You might fully swing through somebody and it could take, let's say you had for some reason 1,000 milliseconds, so a whole second of ping. You could swing through somebody and wait, and by the time the second's over, then you see what happened with the swing. That's what happens if you have more than 100 milliseconds in our game. But that's kind of what we do, is like the client, because you're playing the animation lined up in real time, we have to wait for that message to get to the server, or from the server to the client on what actually happened with the attack. So only server doesn't play any hit stop at all. Server doesn't have to. Only clients do, because we have to wait for the server. Which actually, I think that's why the server played after clients. Or that was the idea, but it messed up parries. So we also have to worry about parries. We have to worry about both ways, where it's like hits, we would benefit from hits if the server played the animation before the client, because everything would be lined up based on like latency time. And so hits would feel perfect, but then parries would feel awful because you have to parry way earlier based on your latency's time. So it's the other way with parries. If the server played the animation based on latency time after clients played it, parries would be able to be perfect. You could parry at perfect time on your animation and it would reach the server before the attack would hit on the server. But then, like I said, hits get weird. So there's a really weird thing, but like parries are perfect. Yeah, simple way of saying it. Parries are perfect if the server plays the animation after, but hits are perfect if they play it before. There's no good answer. So we do a bunch of netcoms. That's why we add hit stops, so we can play it at different times, but then on the client, when the hit stop happens, we can actually adjust that timeline. These buttons point to a U-object child of effect. Yeah, that's how our items. So what's awesome with these items being instanced is we can actually just create them straight on an item. So like consumables. Consumables, like we can create a brand new effect and just define what this is. So I don't actually have to make an effect in my content browser over here and say like, this is the effect that happens when you eat an apple. So it's like effect eat apple or something, right? And then assign it over here. I can actually just create it inline right here, which is really nice. But it's also to the point where like all this stuff only exists on the server and everything. So you don't have to worry about somebody like creating an effect and cheating and sending it to the server. It's like effects only exist on the server. And currently, I think Gas has a way of like at runtime, like through code building effects. We don't do that. Because I can't think of a great way to like cheat prevention yet. So it's like if an effect triggers, it was built from the editor. Like they're baked out from the editor. We can't runtime build these things. Trying to do, yeah, full data oriented inventory, give them action aside. Yeah, that's the way we started leaning with our inventory, was full data oriented. It's just because of legacy reasons, you know, the game's so old, we had to continue with like inheritance and stuff with it. If we didn't have the 209 items we have in the game right now and we had to start fresh, yeah, we would go full data oriented and every item would just be a base of an item PDA and never need to be child classed or anything. Probably feel great to. Yeah, honestly, spears. Anything that's like a really big swing feels really good with a hit stop effect, I think. Fast combat, like if you have a bunch of daggers doing hit stops, I find it kind of weird. It feels more like you're stuttering, but it really comes down to how fast you attack. Item effects are just structs with they're U objects instead of structs. Because you can do instanced U objects as a piece of data. It's really interesting. So how you would normally, like if you made like a data asset in here, right? That data asset isn't like a new class. It's just a U object that you open up. But doing instance objects on properties like this, I can add a new definition and decide what it is. It's like making a data asset, but it doesn't show up in your content browser. Like that's exactly what it is. Like I'm right here, I'm making a new data asset. But the data asset only exists inside of like this item here, and it uses the same like U package that this uses. So when it saves it, and so it doesn't actually show up outside of it. So if I delete this item, the data asset that's created because of the drop down here would also get deleted because they share the same package. It's really cool. Instanced objects as properties are one of the best things I've learned inside of Unreal. Honestly, like can't recommend them enough. Are the item effects essentially registered? You can reference them at runtime. Yeah, if I make the effect over here, like if I make it in the content browser, like make it like this, I can reference them at runtime from anything. If I make it as part of this, so like I make an apple and I give the apple a specific effect, that I can't register from outside, or I can't reference this from outside the apple. This was created inside the apple, and only the apple gets this. I guess technically, yeah, I could load up the apple and then load up its effect that it runs from anywhere at runtime. Technically, yeah, so I could do that, but it's a lot more difficult because you actually need to load the apple into memory to load this. So if you want to make a custom effect for an item, made your arms drop off, you need to add a new item effects. And oh, I read that part. Okay, so yeah, if you want to make a custom effect, so you child class of, yeah, so you would never have to make a child class of an effect. You would make a child class of an effect definition. So the effect itself is a U object that instances a bunch of effect definitions, which are also basically think of like a data asset, but you would make those. So when I make one of these, the ability, attribute layer, Q, all of these are effect definitions. And it's basically, I'm just saying like this effect itself, this is what it does. And so if I make a new effect definition, which has a virtual function for activation and deactivation and stuff, that's what gets called. So I can say what this effect would do, and I can make a new definition for just about anything I'd want, like coding wise, and then I would just still add it to the effect. Effect public U object. I believe so. It might be data sub. I think it's U rep object sass, which is actually just a replicated U object. In case I want to replicate them, which most effects don't need to replicate. It's actually is weird to say. It's the effect of the effect is what's replicated, if that makes sense. So if effect that decrements stamina, right? The effect isn't replicated. Stamina is replicated. The effect just decrements it. About with a hydrate and a posture check. Thank you, thank you. But yeah. And so to make one of these, it is a U object, but it's made the same way a data asset is. So I use like from the editor, we have an editor factory. So when I click this, it just makes a new U object and sticks it in the content browser and all that stuff. If we make it that way. Eventual consistency is what I was thinking of. Wait for a part, I forgot. Oh, how do you make, okay, so how do you make it? What do you gotta Google? I don't remember. I think I learned it from source code. I don't think I learned it off Google. But it's a U factory. So you probably could Google it and learn about factories. Here's the factory for an effect. So you make a child of a U factory, right? And then you just have to override factory create new. The rest of the stuff is just like extra things. Well, you also want the constructor because you'll want to say what its supported class is, because factories use the reflection system to figure out how they work. So whenever the engine runs import is what it, like we're importing something, it'll know the class, or it has actually a bunch of information. But if you have a class of what you want to import, it runs through like every effect and tries to find every factory and try to find the factory with the supported class. So when I'm down here and I click the fact that I want to make an effect, it knows like, hey, I want to make something of the effect class. Boom, hits my factory because I have the same supported class. So it does factory create new, which for me is just new object. Oh, we also give it the transactional flag because it's being made. So we want the editor to know like, hey, if I control Z, this is a transaction, like an editor transaction. Yeah, okay, so eventual consistent. So that's what that means. Yeah, the effect isn't replicated. The effects are eventually consistent because what they're doing is replicated. Like attributes are replicated, so effects only. Effects can be replicated. That's why we made them this, but they're all the ones we currently have are not replicated. We did this just so in the future, if we ever needed to make an effect that needed replication itself, we could. But currently we don't have any effects that actually replicate. It's just the result of the effect gets replicated. Yeah, editor stuff's so much more fun. It is. It is a lot of fun. Yeah, no problem, Corvia. I love answering questions and helping out, so it's no problem at all. I think I learned this by looking at how data assets do it. I think I found the factory for data assets. Because you know, when you go into here and you click the fact that you want a data asset, and then it pulls up a window and it's like, oh, pick your asset class. Actually, for the longest time, I didn't know how to make these without asking that window. So effects, I never plan on child classing, right? But I'm pretty sure I made them so long ago. I know how to do it now, but if I click an effect, it's going to pull up this window and ask me to pick a class. And I had no idea how to do it without doing this. And it's simple. It's just I was so out of my element when I first learned it that I just copied exactly what data assets did. But yeah, I don't plan on us ever making anything different. It's basically on configure properties. We set our cached definition class. We set it to a null pointer. And there's actually this class, an S class picker dialog pick class, right? That pulls up a new window that like freezes the game thread basically until it gets a result, which is crazy. When I first learned that, because I never knew how this worked. Like, I'm like, okay, we're spawning a slate widget, but like, how does, like, we feed in chosen class, give it a slate widget, but by the time I click the widget and everything, this function should be done. But no, it actually just freezes the game thread until you pick something. And so once you pick something, this code continues, and we know if you actually, well, for one, hit OK instead of cancel, and then we know what your class is. It's so cool. Yeah, you just set chosen class, exactly. So actually, if we wanted to not have that window pop up, I can just delete all of this on it. Like, just get rid of configure properties. That's all configure properties is doing. But yeah, this it blew my mind when I first learned that like this window here is freezing the game thread. So like it's why like if I click back here, this flashes. I can't do anything in the editor because it's frozen right now because this window's up. When I started to learn that you can do stuff like that, it blew my mind. Because then you could like inline ask for questions in the editor, and not have to have like callbacks, right? Because that's how I would have thought to do it, is like a callback. You click this, and the editor's still running the background, everything's rendering, blah, blah, blah. And once I click select, a delegate runs on the factory, and then the factory's like, okay,